The CEO's entire deal, worth $30 million, was falling apart right in front of him. His translator bailed last minute, the Chinese clients looked offended, and panic set in. Until the janitor quietly walked in, mop still in hand. No one paid attention until she opened her mouth. Fluent, perfect Mandarin. What she said next not only saved the deal, it changed her life forever. Daniel Carrington slammed the phone down harder than he meant to. His office, usually a fortress of glass, marble, and order, felt like it was closing in. His translator, a Harvard grad with an impressive LinkedIn page, had just texted, "Emergency appendectomy." "I'm so sorry." Daniel didn't even finish reading. Today wasn't just another Tuesday. It was the biggest deal of his career, possibly of his life. A partnership with Jinlong Holdings, one of China's most elusive private equity firms, was supposed to be signed in under an hour. Without a translator fluent in Mandarin and the subtle cues of high-level negotiations, everything could go sideways. His assistant Michelle popped her head in. "Sir, they're in the elevator." 5 minutes out. Daniel's pulse kicked harder. "Michelle, call the agency. Anyone fluent, anything with a pulse." "I've already tried. It's 6 a.m. in San Francisco. No one's answering." Daniel rubbed his face and cursed under his breath. He wasn't the panicking type. But this was a nightmare. Downstairs, a quiet figure pushed her mop across the polished lobby floor. Mei Lin moved with the kind of care most people missed. She wiped every fingerprint, caught every speck. She knew who was arriving today. Everyone did. She even woke up early, put her hair in a neat bun, and pressed her cleaning uniform extra smooth. Not because she expected to be noticed. She never was. But because today, for some reason, she had a feeling. As the elevator doors opened, Mei stepped back, gripping her mop. 3 sharply dressed Chinese executives emerged, immaculate suits, unreadable faces. No one offered a greeting. Their eyes scanned the space like surgeons about to enter an operating room. They didn't need to say it. They were watching everything. Michelle greeted them, stiff and awkward, leading them toward the penthouse elevator. The tension was already creeping. Upstairs, Daniel put on his best face, but couldn't shake the pit growing in his chest. He'd done business with Europeans, Canadians, even Dubai-based financiers. But with this crowd, one wrong word meant disrespect. And disrespect meant the end. He walked forward, extended his hand, smiled. "Welcome. Thank you for coming all this way." Silence. Then a few clipped phrases in Mandarin. He didn't understand a word. His smile froze. He looked at Michelle. She shrugged helplessly. He turned pale. Just then, a voice, soft but clear, cut through the silence. "They're asking if you have the documents and pricing ready." Everyone turned. At the edge of the conference room stood Mei, still in her janitor uniform, still holding the mop. Her cheeks flushed, but her voice steady. Daniel blinked. "What did you just say?" Mei stepped forward, slowly. I speak Mandarin. And Cantonese. I can help, if that's okay." The Chinese executive in the center, gray hair, serious brow, raised an eyebrow. Then, unexpectedly, nodded. Daniel looked at Mei as if seeing her for the first time. In that moment, he realized something that hit harder than the failed translator, harder than the lost deal might have. The smartest person in the room had been there every day, scrubbing toilets, cleaning up after his board meetings. And he'd never even learned her name. For a moment, Daniel didn't breathe. Mei had moved to the head of the conference table like it wasn't even strange, like she hadn't just been mopping the marble 15 minutes ago. The Chinese executives didn't flinch. If anything, they looked relieved. Daniel shot a glance at Michelle, who looked just as stunned as he felt. But there was no time to question it. Mei turned to the trio and, in polished, perfectly paced Mandarin, offered tea, apologized for the delay, and explained the translator had fallen ill. She slipped in a respectful compliment about their long flight and their firm's reputation. The shift in the room was immediate. The older executive, the one with the silver streak in his hair and an unreadable expression, cracked the smallest hint of a smile. Daniel watched the ice melt in real time. Mei nodded toward him. "They'd like to begin with the terms you discussed over email, and they are especially interested in how the equity split will function post-merger." "Wait, how do you even know what we discussed?" Daniel asked, stunned. Mei paused, hesitant. I've cleaned your office for 6 years. You speak loudly on phone calls. I listen. I learn." That wasn't an answer. It was a scalpel to his pride. Daniel looked down. He'd never once asked her a real question. The pitch began. Daniel walked them through numbers, market strategy, growth potential. And Mei. She didn't just translate. She interpreted. She softened certain words, adjusted tones, explained American sarcasm with elegance, and added cultural context Daniel never would have known to include. At one point, When one of the executives raised a subtle concern about risk, May didn't just relay the words. She leaned toward Daniel and whispered, "He's not convinced your market data is stable. You should tell the story about the Chicago pilot." He did. It worked. This wasn't translation. It was diplomacy. 45 minutes in, Daniel leaned back in his chair as the lead executive spoke again. May listened, then translated. "He says this is the first American team they've met that actually shows humility. He says, your company has earned respect." Daniel blinked. Earned. The man reached into his case, pulled out a pre-signed letter of intent, and slid it across the table. Michelle gasped. Daniel couldn't speak. The meeting wasn't just saved. The deal was done. The three men stood. Handshakes followed. Quiet bows. As they left, the last executive turned to May and said something in Mandarin that made her eyes widen just a little. She nodded, hands clasped in front of her, humble as ever. Then silence again. Daniel stood in his glass office, watching the elevator lights descend. Then turned to May. "What did he say to you?" She looked down. He said, "You're not just a cleaner. You're a bridge." Daniel felt something shift in him he couldn't name. Shame, maybe. Respect. Gratitude. All tangled. He stepped closer. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" May met his eyes for the first time. No one ever asked. The boardroom emptied. But Daniel couldn't move. He stared at the door, at the chair where May had sat, at the untouched coffee she'd poured. "Michelle," he said quietly. "Get me her file." "Who?" He didn't answer. She already knew. Downstairs, May pushed her cart back into the janitor's closet. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. But something in her chest was rattling like a locked box someone had finally found the key to. She didn't expect thanks. She didn't expect applause. That's not why she stepped in. She did it because when things fall apart, someone has to act. Even if that someone is invisible. But she wasn't always invisible. 6 years ago, Mei Lin stepped off a 14-hour flight with her son in one arm, a worn degree from Tsinghua University in the other, and exactly $312 in her pocket. She'd been a linguist. A translator for diplomats in Beijing, fluent in 4 languages. A rising star. Then her husband died. An accident. A drunk driver. And just like that, the system that once celebrated her locked her out. No support. No job. Just whispers of shame from in-laws who told her she had no place anymore. She came to America because her son loved the idea of freedom. Of cities with bridges and people who spoke in different rhythms. But no company cared about her degree. They cared about U.S. experience. She applied to over 100 jobs in her first 3 months. Nothing. Until one morning, a janitorial supervisor at Carrington and Wells called and said, "Can you clean bathrooms?" She said yes. She scrubbed floors with a degree tucked in her purse. Learned business English by overhearing phone calls. Read reports she found in trash bins. Studied PowerPoint slides tossed aside after meetings. And her son. She taught him every night. Mandarin, English, Spanish, science. He was 11 now. Smarter than she'd ever been. May never complained. Never looked bitter. She watched the men in suits pass her by like she was wallpaper. Every day. Every shift. Until today. Upstairs, Daniel stared at May's HR file. Birthplace, Shanghai. Languages, Mandarin, Cantonese, English. Education, Bachelor of Linguistics. Masters in International Relations. Work history, domestic assistant, Carrington and Wells. No mention of her former roles. No listed references. Just a small sticky note added 2 years ago by someone in payroll. Quiet. Never misses a shift. Fluent in something. Daniel closed the file and felt a lump rise in his throat. This woman had walked past his glass office hundreds of times. Heard his meetings. Picked up his trash. Watched his company rise, and no one had seen her. Until she saved them all. He stood up. Walked to the window. And whispered something to himself he never thought he'd say. "I've built an empire of blind men." The boardroom wasn't designed for humility. Everything about it screamed dominance, floor-to-ceiling windows, chairs that cost more than a month's rent, a live ticker of the NASDAQ running quietly behind the CEO's head. But that morning, something was different. Daniel walked in carrying a file. Not his usual sleek binder. A manila folder. No title. Just one word handwritten on the tab, MEI. The board was already seated, 10 partners, all dressed sharp, all looking confused. He didn't sit. He didn't plug in a laptop. He just stood at the head and said, "Before we begin today's numbers, I need to tell you what happened this morning." They listened. Not because he ordered them to, but because his voice shook slightly, and Daniel Carrington never wavered. He told them everything. How the translator bailed. How the deal was hanging by a thread. How the janitor, he said it like it burned, stepped in, spoke fluent Mandarin, and not only rescued the negotiation but sealed it. He told them about the executive's reaction, about the pre-signed letter of intent, about the words, "Your company has earned respect." The room was silent. Then a voice from the end, "You're saying she has no formal role here? No clearance? No contract beyond janitorial?" Daniel looked down. "She earns $15.25 an hour. No benefits. No voice." A pause. The CFO leaned forward. "And yet she understood every piece of our strategy. She understood more than some of us sitting here." Another board member scoffed. "So what now? You're recommending we promote her?" "No," Daniel said. "I'm not recommending. I'm insisting." He turned to the door. "May." She stepped in slowly. Not in her uniform. In a plain white blouse, clean jeans, and the same worn sneakers. Her son stood beside her, holding a book in one hand and a cracked tablet in the other. The board looked confused again, until Daniel added, "He's why she works nights. She tutors him during the day. She didn't want him raised by the system that failed her." May looked nervous. Not because she was out of place, but because she'd spent so many years being told she had no place. Daniel nodded at her. "Tell them what you told me this morning." She hesitated, then spoke, softly but clearly. "You build companies to last. But you can't build trust without understanding. And you can't understand people you never see. I've been here 6 years. I know this company. I know its people, its rhythms, its weaknesses. But no one ever looked my way, until the lights were about to go out." The room stayed still. She continued, "I don't need a title. I've done enough work without one. But if you want to build something real in Asia, or anywhere, you'll need someone who can listen between the words. That's what I do." Daniel smiled, quietly, proudly. "I'd like to offer May the position of Director of Cultural Strategy. Effective immediately. Full salary. Full equity package. Direct report to me." The board whispered. Then silence. Then, one by one, heads nodded. Unanimous. Later, as the meeting ended and people filed out, May stood near the window, holding her son's hand. Daniel walked up beside her. "You know," he said, "I always thought I ran this place. Turns out, I just owned the walls." She smiled gently. "And I've been sweeping around them." Monday morning. The marble lobby looked the same, polished, glossy, unchanged. But everyone felt it, something had shifted. For the first time in 6 years, May didn't clock in through the service entrance. She walked through the front glass doors, her son beside her, wearing his best shirt and nervous eyes. The security guard, who used to wave her past without a glance, stood and said, "Ms. Lin. Welcome." Not janitor. Not ma'am. "Ms. Lin." She smiled, thanked him, and walked toward the elevator. But she paused. "I'll be back later this week," she said softly. "Those corner hallways still need mopping." Then she stepped inside. Not as staff. Not as invisible. As leadership. Upstairs, her new office was modest. May had requested it personally. No corner window, no assistant desk. Just a clean space with a sturdy desk, whiteboard, and a bookshelf already half-filled with cultural history, language guides, and a framed photo of her late husband. Daniel knocked once before entering, 2 coffees in hand. "One of the Chinese execs called this morning," he said, setting the cup down. "They're sending something. Said it's a small gesture of deep acknowledgement. Should be here any minute." May smiled. "They don't do that often." "No, they don't," Daniel agreed. "I think you might have changed them too." Just then, Michelle buzzed on the intercom. "There's a delivery for Ms. Lin. From Shanghai. You'll want to come down for this." In the lobby, a sleek wooden crate waited. A courier gently unlatched the lid, revealing a black velvet box. Inside, a glass sculpture, crystal clear, hand-cut, delicate but bold. A bridge. Perfectly crafted. Beneath it, a handwritten note in Mandarin. To the woman who spoke quietly but connected 2 worlds. May's hand trembled as she lifted it. The light caught the glass. It shimmered like truth. Her son looked up at her. "Mom, why'd they send you a bridge?" She knelt beside him, tears rising, and whispered, "Because I never stopped building one. Even when no one was looking." 1 week later, the company launched its global division, led by May Lin. Interviews poured in. Articles followed. The janitor who spoke fluent Mandarin, they wrote. But Daniel insisted every piece correct it. She was never just a janitor. She was always more. We just didn't look. And her son. He got a full scholarship from Jinlong Holdings to attend one of the top language academies in Beijing. They sent a letter addressed only to the son of the woman who changed everything. Ending line, on screen. Sometimes, the most fluent voices are the ones no one bothered to hear. Until the day the room falls silent, and she speaks.